We fall in love, we buy our first car, we try and buy our first house, and by the time you're in your mid-30s, most people are overwhelmed by money and usually debt as well. And so what I want to teach people is obviously some godly principles of managing money, but just the mindfulness of watching where that money goes. So my first slide, if you can put it up there, the title is The Stewardship of the Other 90%. So obviously our Bible asks us to tithe and give to the church, and it's usually 10%. And we think, okay, once we've given that 10%, we've done our Christian job. But the reality is everything we have comes from God. And we can't just say, okay, we've given our 10%, and then we can just go randomly spend the other 90%. All of the money, everything we have from and wealth is a word that encompasses not only our money, but our health, our spiritual life, our family. So really, we are given this wealth, this abundance, and we have to manage that from our physical health to our relationships to our money. And so we want to know, how to focus on the other 90% and how to manage that. So the next slide, Corinthians, and guys, I do have some scripture that I'm going to go through very quick. So you've already heard a lot of scripture from the other great speakers, Scott and Peter. But this is Corinthians 2, and it says, "Remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver, and God is able to bless you abundantly. So in all things and all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work, as it is written." So we want to be able to go and use our money properly, make more money, because I believe good people with more money will do more good things. Every year the Lord has blessed me and I've made more and more money in my career, and now I'm able to give way more money to my church, way more money to charities, volunteer for things like Habitat for Humanity or doing seminars for churches, because God has put abundance in my life because I've always focused on giving back to others. And I know that everybody here in the room believes the same thing. But now we're looking at the next slide, stewardship. We need to carefully manage our money. And not to try and sound negative or depressing, but Canada right now just got rated as having the highest debt level out of any country in the world. The amount of debt Canadians have is out of control. And that is a lot because of media telling us that, oh, we should drive the brand new car, we should have the big house. If you're a young person, I'm not picking on you specifically, but, millennials, I got to have the brand new iPhone to, keep up with my friends. Or, I see my kids are 8 and 10 years old, and I see some of their friends where they've got an Xbox and a PlayStation and a Nintendo, and I'm like, those are like $300-400 a piece, and they've got like all, 4 gaming systems. So we just really need to be aware that God gives us this abundance, but are we spending this money responsibly? And, we might be thinking, well, hey, this is my money. As long as I give my 10% to the church, I should be able to spend the rest. But we should be looking at what can I do with the rest? What difference can I make to my community, my church, and other people? If you're lucky enough to have a good career that you love and you get paid well, can you use your career, your income to bless other people? But we have to be stewards to that money. So there's a really quick scripture here. This is Proverbs 31. The woman who is good with her money, a wife of noble character who can find, she's worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. I was just talking to one gentleman at the back there. I was saying, happy wife, happy life. And Peter, I know you're getting married soon. So that is some good advice. But we need to be like the woman in the scripture. This woman seems to be a wise steward of her resources, all of her resources. And that could be not just her money, that could be her time, giving her time to other people. This is another stat because I'm a stats guy, but the average Canadian watches 17 hours of TV a week. Are we really using our time, well to serve others. We're given this abundant life so we can give back to other people, but spending 17 hours of our time watching reality television or, Amazing Race is not necessarily serving other people. It might be entertaining, but hey, maybe an hour or two a week, not 17 hours. She teaches us that stewardship is far more than giving money. Stewardship touches our work ethic in all the ways we spend and invest. So when we're at our workplace, are we bringing our Christian values to our workplace? Are we talking and sharing God with other people? Are we being friendly and gracious to other people while we're at work? And you'd be amazed that if you do have that attitude of gratitude around your workplace, you will probably do better at your job. You will get noticed at your job. You are probably more likely to get that next promotion if you're the person who's always, greeting somebody every morning when you come to work. You're always grateful. You're always going out of your way to help people. And I'm not saying that you have to, let people walk over you by taking advantage of you, because you need to be confident in who you are as well. But just the fact that you have an abundant attitude, you'd be amazed at how that aura of appreciation glows around you and basically serves God's purpose, where we are the light of the world, shining on other people. So stewardship applies to every aspect of our life. So the next one here, again, I'm not going to read all the scripture because I want to get to the details, but in the scripture it says she works hard. Are we working hard enough? And I'm not saying that you've got to work 70, 80 hours a week, but is there a way that you can work harder at your workplace, that you could maybe give back a little bit more, whether it's to your community or your church? When you do work hard, the Lord will bless you. Are you taking that blessing and are you now investing that money to have more money to help other people? The story of the talents, I won't go through that, but, do you take your money and do you hoard your money and stick it under your mattress because you're afraid to lose it? Or do you take that abundance that God's given you and now use that to sow that investment and then reap the harvest when that money, comes to maturity, so you can now use that to help other people? And investing, guys, I'm going to go through some of that in detail in the second half. Investing is something that we are not taught in school. For most of us, we're fearful of investing because we've all heard those stories. Oh, I've got a friend that invested money and he lost it all. I guarantee you, any investments that I show you, you cannot put in $100 and lose $100. If you invest your money in good, profit-making companies, your money will grow for you over time. One example, has anybody gone to Tim Hortons in the last week? Like this morning on your way here? Okay. So do you think if you invested in Tim Hortons, you're going to wake up tomorrow and find out that Tim Hortons just went out of business? Probably not. They could sell horrible coffee, they can mess up the donuts, and they'd still probably sell it because it's almost un-Canadian not to go to Tim Hortons. You see those Tim Hortons commercials where they're in the hockey rink and the parents are all sitting there with their Tim Hortons watching their kids play hockey? That's like a Canadian pastime. Watch your kids play hockey and drink Tim Hortons. So companies like that are in business for the long term, and we all spend money on that company as an example, but there's dozens of good companies in Canada that you can invest in and make a long-term profit, but you've got to be open-minded to looking and educating yourself on different ways to invest your money so that you can increase your abundance, so then you've got an overflowing of money that you can now share with other people. So the next slide. So as a result of her hard work and wise spending, she's truly a wise steward in two additional ways. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. She gives freely. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She's planned ahead. So this is the next thing. We need to make sure we have a plan for the long term. All of us would like to retire one day, and some of us are going to get to the point where physically we can't work anymore. So I love what I do. I will do financial planning, financial coaching for the next 30, 40, 50 years, but maybe when I'm 70 years old, I only do it 3 days a week instead of 5 or 6 days a week. So we all eventually need to retire, but are we planning ahead? And not just planning for us, are we planning for the next generation? Are we planning for our kids? So one of the things that I help clients with is RESPs. I want people to have an education plan for their kids because the cost of education in the future is going to be even more expensive than it is today. If you have a child that's born today, 18 years from now, by the time they go to school, it's going to be $100,000 for 4 years of college. So you imagine the student loans people are going to come out with, it's going to be like a mortgage. They're going to have to pay off their student loan mortgage before they can ever buy a house. So are you planning today for your kids' future? And if you're a grandparent in the room, you have the opportunity to help your grandkids. So it's not just your retirement, it's your kids. It could be your parents. Maybe your parents didn't grow up with the same education that you have available. Maybe they immigrated to Canada and they didn't have, the financial vehicles in their previous country that we have here in Canada. And maybe your parents are now in their 70s and 80s, and they're going to live a long time, and you might need to financially help them out. It's great that we're all living longer and longer, but if we're not saving more money, a lot of people are going to be in retirement for 20 to 25 years, and if they haven't planned properly, they could run out of money. And unfortunately, in this country, we have some social assistance, but trying to live off of CPP and old age security does not give you a great quality of life. So it's not just your life, it could be your kids, it could be your parents, it could be somebody in your community that if you do really well and you plan well, you can say, you know what, I know you're struggling a little bit, don't worry about it, I'm going to write you a check and I'm going to remove that, right? So we need to think of our abundance not just for ourselves, but for the other people that we can pass that on to. So next slide. So finally, we learned from her example that when you work hard and spend wisely and plan ahead, there's money left over to give generously. So many people in our society today are thinking about just getting by for them. And I know this is true because I sit down with 4 or 5 families every day, and I sit down with people that make $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, and they tell me, Mike, I just don't know where the money goes. There's just none left at the end of the month. And $90,000 a year is a great income, but it's not what it used to be, especially if you live here in Toronto. With the cost of housing going up, it's great that the value of your house has doubled in the last 5 years, but so is your heat, your hydro, your land tax. And guess what? That's going to continue. Every 10 years, inflation basically doubles our expenses. I've got clients now that are in their 80s that are moving into nursing homes, and it's $4,000 to $5,000 a month today. By the time I get there, it's going to be like $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And again, I'm not trying to be depressing. I'm trying to say you just need to focus on planning ahead. Because if you have, a 20 or 30-year time horizon, you have a lot of time to get your money working for you. Now, if you're in the room and you maybe only have a 10-year planning horizon, you can still make a huge difference. So I don't want you to give up on plans, but you need to start sooner rather than later. Okay, next slide. So living above our means. And this is the way most people are living. I'm not saying any of you guys are probably all fantastic with your money, but the government stats show it. There was an article that came out about a month ago that said the average Canadian is a $300 a month payment away from not paying their mortgage on time. $300 a month would basically break most people's budget, and they would not be paying their mortgage or their car loan or their credit cards on time. Well, we now are in an environment where we had super low interest rates, and interest rates are starting to go up. And now when your mortgage comes up for renewal, you could find out that your mortgage just jumped $200 to $300 to $400 a month because you have to renew at a higher interest rate. Did anybody own a mortgage back in the late 80s when interest rates were like 20%? So late 80s, it was 20. And then about 2 years ago was the ultimate low. It was down at like 2%. Well, we've now crept back up to about 3.2%, and the government just brought in this new stress test rule as of January 1st, where you now have to qualify at 2% higher than the current posted rate. So 47% of Canadians are coming up for renewal on their mortgage in the next 12 months, and out of those, 43% of those people will not pass the stress test. The government has already done the numbers on it. They know how much debt Canadians have. Because if you have a mortgage with your bank can do a random credit check on wherever they want. They know what your credit score is, they know what your income is, and they've already given the numbers to the government before they brought the stress test in, and they know that a lot of people are not going to qualify. So we need to sit down with people and show them how to budget their money, pay down their debt, or they could literally lose their house when their mortgage comes up for renewal. Living within our means, and I actually say the one below, living below your means. A lot of people, they're like, okay, as long as I'm not getting into credit card debt every month, then I'm doing okay. Well, no, you actually need to live below your means so that you have excess cash flow where you can save money for your retirement, your kids' education, and still be able to tithe to your church as well. but a lot of people want to keep up with the Joneses, and it's a really dangerous environment that we're in, because as interest rates go up, that debt that you could afford yesterday, you now can't afford in the future. Okay, it's really quiet in here, so I probably need to talk a little bit more positive. But part of my job is to be the voice of reason and share the reality to people that we need to just be aware that every time that we take out our credit card or our debit card, do I really need to purchase this? The brochure you guys have with the God Money, it's got the ATM machine on the front poster there. Well, one of the most dangerous things that was ever created was the credit card. Credit cards weren't created until the mid-70s. So you've got people that are in their 70s and 80s today, they never had credit cards. They were brought up on the fact that if you don't have cash, you don't buy it. But we've got a whole generation of kids that they've always had credit cards available. And then the second worst thing after a credit card is the tap. Because now you don't even see the money come into your pocket, you just tap it. I see people, they go to Tim Hortons and they're ordering like this drink and that drink and a sandwich and a donut and tap. And I'm like, do you know what you just spent? No idea. And guys, I'll pick on myself. When I first got in this industry 13 years ago, I thought I was good with my money. I had somebody sit down with me and do my financial plan for me. And they said, Mike, for the next month, track every single thing that you spend, and you'll be amazed at where you find your money's going. And I thought I was going to be pretty good until I found out, oh yeah, I go to Tim Hortons every day on my way to work, a coffee and a bagel every day, 5 days a week. That's $350 a day. That's $150 a month. And I have now done this same budget with thousands of clients, and I see people, it's more like $200-300 a month. If you go to Starbucks, talk about like $400 a month, right? But $150 a month, just to give you an idea of the long-term effect, $150 a month, if it were invested instead, because you make your coffee at home, get rid of the bagel, they're bad for you anyways, but $150 a month invested at an 8% rate of return for 30 years is $350,000. That's how much money I was going to give Tim Hortons over the next 30 years if I just was stuck in my ways, stuck in my routine, and didn't look at other options. And now, when I invest money, I use Tim Hortons as an example. You want to invest in Tim Hortons. You don't want to buy Tim Hortons, right? So, and guys, a lot of times it just comes down to not necessarily laziness, but just you get stuck in these habits, and you're just not giving yourself like a checkup from the neck up and saying, hey, do I really need this coffee? Or can I buy it at home instead? Can I take it in a thermos? I think most of you got that sheet, How to Reduce Your Expenses. And there's simple examples on there of, instead of going to the movies and buying the popcorn and the pop and the candies, I got 2 little kids. For my family to go to the movies, it's like $100 by the time you add in all the candies. Go to the dollar store before you go to the movies, sneak it in your purse, and pay for just the movie instead of buying the $50 worth of candy. Even better, if you don't need to necessarily go to the movie, you can go to the library and you can rent movies for free. Or if you've got an Android box, you download it, right? So there's different things you can do. Do you need to drive to work yourself, or can you carpool with a coworker? Can you brown bag your lunch instead of buying it from the cafeteria? The average family that I sit down with and I go through a detailed budget typically tells me they found $300 to $400 a month that they're spending on miscellaneous things that they don't necessarily need. A gym membership, and I'm all for health, but if you haven't gone to the gym in 2 years and you're still paying for your gym membership, either start going or stop paying for the gym membership, right? If you're paying for, magazines or newspapers that you can get online for half the price, like I love the Globe and Mail, but I was paying $50 a month for the Globe and Mail, and you can get the online version for $10. Right? There's different ways that you can save money, and you'd be amazed when you add it up. It's literally hundreds of dollars a month. And it's literally the difference between you retiring and having a good quality of life and having enough abundance to share with others, and getting to retirement and going, uh-oh, CPP is only paying me $800 a month, and $800 a month is not enough to retire on. So we want to make sure that people can control their finances, have the blessing of having abundance and giving it to others. Next slide, please. So am I in financial bondage? The solution boils down to a series of decisions. Do you want to be a steward and acknowledge God's full control? And we all became Christians and we gave ourselves over to God, but we need to give our finances over to God as well. Will I confess my mismanagement and pray for God's help? Ask Him to give you the fortitude, give you the discipline to watch your money and be more disciplined with that money. Will I seek godly advice? Will I consult my spouse, other Christian and Christian resources? Back at the table there's a ton of resources as well as my table as well. And you don't need to take the advice from me. You can take the information, sleep on it, think about it, go to the person that you already deal with and ask them, hey, do you teach some of these Christian-based principles on how to manage my finances? The problem I find in financial services, and I'm not bashing any company, I'm not even mentioning my company's name, is that most financial advisors sell individual products. They don't do financial planning. You do not need another financial product. I'm actually going to show you in one of my slides. Most Canadians have too many financial products. What you need is a strategy. You need a plan that shows you where you are today and where you want to be in the future and how to achieve those goals working backwards. So year by year, you can see yourself either progressing towards retirement, paying down your mortgage quicker, saving for your kids' education, being able to give more money to your church. When I first became a Christian, I'm like, 10%. Wow, when you actually do the math on that, 10% is a lot of money. But I started with 2 or 3%. And then as I became better with my finances, I made more money, I was able to give more. So you need to have a plan for these things, but we need to make sure that we understand where the little dollars and cents goes. See, I thought $3.50 spent on Tim Hortons wasn't a big deal. But when you add it up over a month and then over a 30-year lifetime, it's a huge deal over the long term. Will I make the lifestyle changes? Lifestyle and other changes needed. Do you need to, I'm going to pick on cars for a second. Cars are a depreciating asset, and I like nice cars just as much as the next person. But part of money management is understanding where is my money going, and is it a appreciating asset or a depreciating asset? And a couple months ago, I was looking at new cars because my car is paid off. It's been paid off for over 2 years. I'm like, my car is paid off. People kept bugging me, hey, when are you going to get your next car? And so I was looking around at like a Mercedes or a Lexus, and I realized cars are really expensive. And I don't need a Lexus. I don't need a Mercedes. I need a car that gets me from point A to point B, good on gas, and doesn't break down. Right? Because at the end of the day, a car depreciates in value. I'd rather you spend the money on buying a bigger house or renovating the current house you're in, because at least your house is going to grow in value. A car always depreciates. And as I was looking around, it's amazing. Once you start thinking about something, you see it more. So all of a sudden, when I was looking for these nice luxury cars, I started noticing, and maybe you guys have noticed this too, how many BMWs, Lexus, Mercedes, Audis are on the road today compared to 10 years ago. And I'll tell you what changed. Financing. When I bought my first car, the longest finance you get was 5 years. Now you can get 7, 8, 9-year car loans. So the guy that makes $50,000 a year is driving an $80,000 BMW. Normally he shouldn't be able to afford that if it was on a 5-year loan, but now they've got people getting these 9-year car loans. What happens if your car dies after 7 years and you still got 2 more years of payments? Oh, don't worry, we'll just take that loan, we'll wrap into your next one. And then how many times do you do that until you've got like a $100,000 loan and nothing left? I sat down with a gentleman who had a 2-year-old vehicle. You understand, the first year you lose like 30% in value, and then like another 10 to 15% after that. So it was only a 2-year car. He had hardly paid anything off on it. And he's like, you know what, I want a pickup truck for the summer because I want to be able to carry some stuff in the back. I'm going to trade in my car and I'm going to wrap it into my truck. So he took a car that was probably only worth about $10,000, well, maybe $15,000 for a trade-in, lost about $10,000 in value to trade it in to upgrade to a $70,000 fully loaded F-150 pickup truck. And his loan was now like close to $90,000 on a vehicle. But it's, hey, they said I could have it, so they gave it to him. And I think our consumer society has convinced people that as long as I can afford the monthly payment, I can buy it. Another thing I'm going to warn you, because when I was shopping around, I ran into it, and I just blew my mind when the guy told me. I said, I want this vehicle, but I'm only willing to get a 5-year financing, and I want it to be around $400 a month. And he's like, Mike, I can't make that happen. Actually, he goes, you know what, there is a way I can make that happen. He goes, we got this really good program that just came out. It's really popular, especially with young people, and it's called a balloon payment. So he goes, you pay the payment you want now, but at the end of your 5 years, then you just pay the rest of the loan. And I said, how does that work? Well, the vehicle's $60,000. You pay $400 a month, but then in 5 years, you still owe $30,000. And I go, what do I do with that $30,000? He goes, well, at some point, your mortgage is going to come up for renewal, right? Do you know where I'm going with this? Just take the $30,000, wrap it into your mortgage, and now the car is yours. But I still have to pay off the mortgage. And this is one of my biggest worries about interest rates going up, is people are using their house like an ATM machine, and they're living beyond their means, and they're using their house, because we've seen house values go up so much, as basically their bank. And the asset that is growing for you, that should be an asset for your retirement, is now being eaten up by refinancing. The biggest age group of people going bankrupt is seniors over the age of 65, because 41% of people over 65 are entering retirement still with a mortgage. They bought their house 30 years ago for probably $100,000. It's now worth $700,000 or $800,000. But every 5 years, the bank says, no problem. Peter, you wanted that new BMW. You wanted to buy your wife that big ring. The ring was a good idea, by the way. The car's not a good idea. Remember, happy wife, happy life. But every 5 years, Peter goes, oh my gosh, I'm really stressed out. We renovated the house and spent $30,000. We racked up a couple of credit cards because we didn't have an emergency fund, which is another thing I teach people. And our car broke down, our roof had a leak, our kids needed braces. And if you don't have an emergency fund, Visa and MasterCard are your emergency fund. Well, I'm really stressed out about this. My mortgage coming up for renewal, and my mortgage is only at 3%, my credit card's at 19%. So let's just wrap that debt in the mortgage. Now, I have no problem changing 19% to 3%. That makes financial sense. But if you're going to go back and use that credit card again, then all you've done is you've kicked the can down the road, and you just push your debt out a longer and longer time frame. So the next slide here goes through some of the stats. And actually, these are a little bit out of date, so I'm going to give you the up-to-date numbers. This is a presentation I used a couple of years ago. 60% of working Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. Even worse, the Canadian debt-to-income ratio. So if you listen to 680 News, or there's some Christian financial radio programs that will quote this number, it's called the debt-to-income ratio. Right now, it is 169%. Just to explain that, you pay for your taxes, the money after taxes that you see on your paycheck, that's called your disposable income. People are spending 169% of their disposable income to service all of their debt payments. How can you spend 69% more than you make? It's the borrow on Visa, get stressed out, wrap your Visa into your line of credit because it's only at 8%, and then when your mortgage comes up for renewal, the bank says, oh, your line of credit's too big, don't worry, we'll just wrap into your mortgage at 3%. And then start the cycle over. And every 5 years, they just stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out, and then one day you wake up, you're 65 years old, and you still have a mortgage. And I'm not saying that that's everybody, but that is a significant portion of Canadians. The problem is, Canadians don't talk about money. We'd rather talk about politics or sex before we talk about money. And because of that, it's like the ostrich effect, where you stick your head in the sand and you hope that the debt's going to go away. And again, I hope this is not any of you, but the stats show it, and I see it every day at the kitchen table, as people have a ton of debt. The household savings rate has plummeted to 3.8%. Actually, this is out of date. The current Canadian savings rate is less than 1%. Because when your credit cards get maxed out, when interest rates go up, the first thing you cut is savings. Well, if you're not saving money, when do we get to retire? If you're not saving money, how are you going to be able to save money for your kids' education? Okay, let's go to the next slide before somebody jumps off the roof. Okay, so wealth. Again, we talked about wealth. We want spiritual wealth. We want physical wealth. But we need to have financial wealth as well. But right now, the stats are not very good. It shows down there at the bottom, 1% will be wealthy, 4% will be okay, and the other 95% are going to struggle. You're going to have 36% of people at age 65 still working. And hey, if you love what you do, I'm going to work past 65 because I love what I do. But I don't want somebody working as a Walmart greeter or in Tim Hortons when they're 70 years old because they don't have enough money. And no disrespect to them. If they want to work, that's fine. But I think if you're 70 years old and you plan properly and you had abundance in your life, you'd rather be playing with your grandkids when you're 70 years old. You'd rather be volunteering to a charity or a church doing something you love. But I don't want people working when they're 70 or 75 because they financially have to. So it says, why do 90% of people fail when it comes to their finances? No financial education. And guys, I'm not bashing the banks, but in Canada, the Canadian banks have a 95% market share. The banks are huge. That's why you want to invest in the banks. They make lots of money. But the people that work at the bank are employees, and they have a quota of how many products that they have to sell. And on the average bank branch, there's 1,000 new people a day coming through the front door. And you can go ask anybody that works in a bank. They've got a quota of how many credit cards they have to sell, how many lines of credit they need to set up. And they do sell investments, but a lot of times they're so busy trying to keep up with the quota that they don't have time to go back and service the clients on the investment side. And I'm not saying that everybody that works at a bank works that way. I'm just saying in general, and I know lots of people who work in banks, they're not given the freedom from their employer to update or actually do a full financial plan and actually update your financial plan every 6 months, adjust your investments as the economy changes. And it's just sort of, hey, here's your investment. And if you've ever dealt with a bank, you're usually in the same investment for the next 15, 20 years. And the only time the person from the bank calls you is when your mortgage comes up for renewal or they're trying to get you to increase your limit on your line of credit. And again, if you work for a bank, I apologize. Some people that work for banks do a great job. It's just the system they work for. The banks typically don't allow them to do a full financial plan. Has anybody in here ever had somebody from the bank sit down with them and go through a full budget and show you where to reduce your expenses, how to pay down your mortgage quicker? No? Okay, so I'm not trying to beat up on the bank, but I'm just saying that is the way the system typically works. So no financial education, no financial game plan. And there are companies out there that do financial plans, but a lot of companies out there charge $1,000 to do a financial plan. And that's because they're dealing with the top 5% of the population who have at least $250,000 or more to invest. Unfortunately, in financial services, people aren't willing to pay $1,000 up front for a financial plan before they see the value in what you show people. So I do a free financial plan for clients. I educate you, and at the end of the day, if you want to sleep on it, think about it, let your dog chew on it, kids scribble on it, it's up to you. It's completely free because I want people to get the education. And then the final point is having a financial coach, having someone that's going to follow up with you, have some accountability, show you what your net worth is, and then every year as we come to update your financial plan, we're going to show you that your net worth is growing. And I tell clients, if your net worth isn't growing every year, fire me because I'm not doing my job. And that goes with any financial advisor out there in the industry. If you're already dealing with somebody, if they don't focus on your net worth, then they're not focusing on the right thing. Your net worth requires you to lower your liabilities and increase your assets. Unfortunately, the banks make more money on getting you in debt and keeping you in debt as long as possible. So we want to get people debt-free, get you out of that bondage of being stuck with debt. Okay, so next slide. The reason people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. And this is where I talked about you don't need another financial product. So there's the chart there with all the arrows. It might be hard to see the wording in each one, but it basically says mortgage, life insurance, bank accounts, RSPs, tax-free savings accounts, RESPs, investment loans, installment loans, credit cards. There's so many different financial products out there, and the average Canadian family has 13 different financial products, and they're usually with multiple different institutions. So it's not easy to track all these different products and what you're spending. And that's why people say, well, Mike, at the end of the month, all I know is there's no money left, right? Because all the money is going out, but there's not a whole lot coming back in. So doing a financial plan will take a look at the full picture. So let's say you've got your mortgage with TD Bank, you got your life insurance through Manulife, you got your car insurance through State Farm, and maybe you got some RSPs at work, you've got some RSPs at your bank, RESP at a separate company, you've got Visa and MasterCard, you got a car loan through Scotia, and you've got all these different products, But how do you know if these products are even the right product for you, or your money is being spent efficiently? Try calling up TD Bank, Manulife, State Farm, Scotia, say, hey, I'm going to put a pot of coffee on. Can you guys all come over to my house on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and I'll get you guys all to talk to each other and tell me if I've got the right product. They won't do that. They want to sell you a product, and no offense, that's what their job is, to sell a product so they can make a profit. But is there any accountability to the overall solution? And is the solutions getting you from plan A, where you are today, to plan B, whether that's retirement or kids' education or giving to your church? So having a financial plan makes a big difference, and then having somebody that's going to follow up with you to make sure that as your life changes, your financial plan changes. So, Peter, you're getting married, right? Your life is going to change for the better. But then, you're going to have kids. So now we need to add that to the financial plan. Then you're going to buy a house. We need to make sure you've got the right house, or I would say the right mortgage, to live within your means. Maybe a couple of years from now, you and your spouse's income goes up. You've got a couple of kids running around the house. House is too small. You want to buy a bigger house. So let's make sure that that fits inside the financial plan, and you can afford to move up to the next bigger house. I see so many, and I'm not picking on young people, but the market today for housing, we all know, is super expensive. And I see young people that go to the bank and they say, oh, hey, you're approved for $800,000. That's the maximum you're approved for. But they go out and they start shopping at the $800,000 level. I was just telling somebody at the back there, my first house I bought when I was 24 was $189,000. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that's so much money. I was stressed out. Now, that same house is probably worth about $500,000. But I see young people that are buying for their first house, like a $600,000-$700,000 house. What happened to the whole concept of buy a small starter home, something that's a little bit beaten up? You put a little bit of sweat equity into it, you paint it, you fix up, do a little bit of drywall, you learn those skills, and then once you've built some equity in the house and you make more money, then you move up to the next house. But it's like everybody wants to buy the brand new house to impress their friends, and they're literally house rich and cash poor. You've heard that one, where there's no money left at the end of the month, and that's only based on current interest rates. You can afford it today. What about when interest rates go to 5, 6, 7%? My first mortgage when I was 24 was 7%. We're probably going to go somewhere close to that. I hope not too close. Okay, next slide. So this is a concept that I teach all my clients, and it's called your financial independence number. This is the amount of money that you need to accumulate to stop working and live off that pot of money. And I'll warn all of you, it's a lot bigger than most people think, because we're not taught in school to think in future dollars. We think, hey, if I have $300,000 when I retire, I'm good. But that $300,000 for some of you, if you're 30 today, 30 years from now, $300,000 is going to be a quarter of what it is today. So for this person here, the example is $1 million. And $1 million isn't that much money in the future. So the example here is, if you want to retire in 30 years with $30,000 a year income, so not lavish, $30,000 is like sort of basic. $30,000 a year income in 30 years from now, you need $73,000 in the future just to live on $30,000 a day. If you retire when you're 65 and you live to 85, that's 20 years in retirement, you would need $1 million just to live for 20 years in retirement with a $30,000 lifestyle. And then working backwards, if we wanted to break that down, today you would need to start saving $585 a month for 30 years to hit the $1 million. But most people, when I sit down with them, if they're saving anything, it's usually $100 to $150 a month. And that's because of Tim Hortons and going out, eating out, going out to the movies. And again, I'm not here to say you can't enjoy your life, but you need to enjoy your life within a plan of spending money that still ensures that you have enough abundance for you and your family members. Okay, the next one, please, and the next one after that. Okay, so for young people, and I know that the crowd is a little bit more mature, but please share this with your kids. If you're 25 years old and you start at 25 years old with $100 a month, 40 years later, you've got $471,000. But most 25-year-olds, oh, I just want to party, I want to have fun, I'll worry about that later. Well, if you wait 1 year, that's only $1,200 that wasn't invested, but 1 year will cost you $46,000 in growth. You wait till you're 30, That $6,000 not invested on the front end, that costs you $175,000 in growth. And 40, I'm not even going to touch that one because it's depressing. But my point is, you need to make sure that you start as soon as possible. And if you're not 25, make sure that the 20-year-olds that you know, they learn this information as well. Because we need to be a steward by passing on the information as well. Okay, debt and debt consolidation. And I'm going to go through this quickly. Debt consolidation can be done properly, and it can also be done not properly. I'm trying to think of the English. Anyways, so this example here, they've got $150,000. They're paying $1,300 a month, but then they also have personal debt, credit cards and lines of credit. Has anybody recently looked at the credit card statement and they show you the date that you're going to have your credit card paid off if you only make your minimum payment? So Jim Flaherty, our old finance minister, legally made credit card companies put that on there, because if you only make your minimum payment on a credit card that's 19%, it actually takes you 30 years to pay off a credit card. So now they actually have to put that date on there. And the reason why is there's two different types of debt. There is a fixed debt and there is a revolving debt. Your mortgage and your car loan is a fixed debt where they pre-calculate the interest. So if you've got a 5-year car loan, they've pre-calculated how much interest you make on each payment, and you know exactly when you're going to pay it off. With a credit card, you can go spend on your credit card every day. So what they do is they charge you daily interest. This is a danger with credit cards and lines of credit, is they actually compound your interest day after day after day. So if you look at the fine print on your credit card, it's not actually 19%, it's 0.4658% that they compound daily. So if you take a $10,000 fixed debt and a $10,000 revolving debt, it will take you 3 times longer to pay off a revolving debt than a fixed debt, even if the interest rate and the payment's the exact same. It's the way they compound the interest. So my point is, we want to help people get out of credit cards, get out of lines of credit, consolidate that money into your mortgage, but we need to take that full payment and now apply that towards the principal of the mortgage. So you go to your bank, and a lot of times they'll help you consolidate. They'll be like, "Oh, hey, great, Odell, we just saved you $500 a month because we consolidated your high interest rate debt into your mortgage. Happy shopping." And you just go back out and use that $500. If you were paying that $500 before, we need to take that payment and now use that to accelerate your mortgage. And if you do that, then it actually shows you that you cut your mortgage potentially in half. By taking the savings you're paying on your credit card line of credit, you apply it to the mortgage, you attack the principal, and if you attack the principal, you save yourself the future interest. And unfortunately with mortgages, people are picking longer and longer amortization mortgages, and on top of that, they're just refinancing and stretching back over a 25-year time period every 5 years, and that's when you wake up 30, 35 years later and you still have a mortgage. So if you consolidate your debt, make sure that they show you what to do with the savings to pay down the principal to save yourself that future interest. And then if you do save yourself that future interest, next slide, and then the next one after that, if we do save that interest, you're going to pay your mortgage off sooner. If you can be mortgage free by the time you're 50, between 50 and 65, you now have 15 years where if you took your mortgage payment, in this case it was like $2,200 a month, $2,200 a month for 15 years literally makes you a millionaire. But unfortunately, most people are buying a house that's too big, they're refinancing too many times in their lifetime, and if they're lucky, they become mortgage free the day before they retire. If we can teach young people, buy a small starter home, something you can afford within your means, pay it down quickly, never refinance your mortgage, pay your mortgage off when you're 50, then between 50 and 65, that 15 years where you've freed up that mortgage payment literally helps you become a millionaire by the time you retire. And again, you can now have abundance where you can give back to others. The next slide, Odell, how am I doing on time? About out. Okay, the next one, yeah, this is my last slide. Perfect. Debt stacking, or if you've ever heard of Dave Ramsey, he calls it snowballing. If you don't have a mortgage or if you don't have equity in your house that you can use to consolidate, the next thing is the financial concept we call debt stacking. So let's say you've got 2 credit cards, you've got a car loan, you've got a mortgage, and a lot of times people tell me, "Oh, I'll pay a little bit extra on this one, a little bit extra on that one," and they spread their payments around. That's actually the worst thing you could do. What you want to do is you want to take your top debt, your target debt, usually the one with the highest interest rate, so credit card, and you put every extra cent down on that top debt. and make the minimum payments on the other one. Because the reason why is all the extra money you dump on the top debt, the high interest rate, that you're attacking the principal, you save yourself all that future interest. And then once you've paid that one off, you take that payment, because you're already used to paying it, you don't go spend it on Starbucks, and you drop it down the next payment. And you accelerate the payment on that. And then you take that one and you drop, and every single time you do that, you're accelerating the amount going towards principal. You save yourself all the future interest. In this example here, they end up getting out of debt 8.5 years sooner. They save them $29,000 in interest, and they're now debt-free by the time they're, well, this example is 43. It might not be the most realistic, but my point is they're debt-free, mortgage-free, credit card free, debt free, and now be disciplined. Don't go buy a bigger house once you pay off that house. Take that money, invest it towards retirement. I love real estate, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, when you go to retire, you need a liquid income that you can live off of. You can't eat your house when you go to retire. You know, right now there's a lot of people where their only asset's their house, and they're having to either sell and move to something smaller, which is sometimes an option, or they have to do a reverse mortgage where they've got to borrow money against their house at 6% to get a monthly income by remortgaging their house at 65 years old. I want to show people how they can invest their money and have their investment pay them a monthly dividend that they can live off of. Okay, so we're going to break right now, and then we'll come back and get into more details about investing. Thank you.
Gift basket. I have a feeling somebody over there is going to win it because the last two have been over there. So all of you might want to go sit over there. Pick a winner.
Okay, it is 0796331. Perfect. Yep. Okay.
Yep. Good. All right. Congratulations.
Is there any diapers in there? Do we have any kids on the way?
All right. So yeah, break. Last break. A bunch of snacks. More Hello, hello, hello. Wow, it's busy over there. I think you guys liked what he had to say, huh? Yeah, oh, it's out there. It's out there, but you got to go to the right guy. You got to go to the right guy over there. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord. I'm just waiting for that table to calm down a little bit over there. You know, it'll still be there after, everyone. Praise the Lord. All right, well, I'm going to get started. Hopefully they catch on. So now we're actually going to do everybody's favorite thing now. We're going to take up the offering. So first off, of course, we're going to hand out some envelopes. People are still kind of streaming in here. If you're needing an envelope for, tax reasons, obviously, just lift up your hand and one of our ushers will be happy to give you one of those. And while we do that, I'm going to read some scripture because I love reading the Bible. That's why I went to Bible college. So what I'm actually going to read is out of Mark 12. We got one over there for Hendrika. So I'm actually going to read out of Mark 12, and I'm going to read from verse 41. It says, Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. So first thing I notice as I read this, it says, Jesus sat by the offering bucket and watched what you put in. Doesn't that make you feel good? Are you happy to know he's watching? I mean, no offense, I would probably be a little bit like, why are you watching me? Right? But Jesus did it. Okay? It says, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith to them, verily I say to you, that this poor widow has cast in more than all they which have cast into the treasury. Now, how does that make any sense? All these rich people threw in great amounts of money, and the poor person threw in 2 mites, yet Jesus said she threw in more. How could she have thrown in more? Well, let's see what Jesus says. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all she had, even all her living. The point I'm making is not you need to give me all your money. I don't want your money, okay? I don't. In the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, there is a currency, but it's not the same currency we have here on earth. It's faith. Faith is the currency of the kingdom of heaven. So how did this poor widow give more money, give more than all these rich people? Because her faith is what she used. She used that money to give to Jesus. She used that money to bless our Lord. And that's really all it's about. I want you to just give what you want to give to bless God, to bless his work, to bless his purposes, to bless his goals, like Scott was talking about. We need to be in alignment with him if we really want that prosperity, right? And like Peter talked about, if you trust God more than you trust money, well, you won't have to have that battle going on in your head saying, oh, I know, I gotta, because Mike's talking about some really awesome stewardship stuff, right? But it still starts with seek God first, right? It doesn't matter if you do everything Mike says and don't have God, right? It doesn't matter if you do everything Mike says and don't have faith. So I just want to encourage you, have faith in God. All right? So I'm going to pray over our offering, then we'll collect them, and we'll get back to Mike's awesome teaching. All right? Father God, thank you so much for this conference. It has been such a blessing to many. I can't even walk down the hall without people telling me how much they're being blessed. And that just blesses me so much because like you said, Lord, it is more blessed to give than to receive. I am really experiencing that today. So, Father, I just pray over this seed that is being sown into your work, into your ministry, into your kingdom, and for your purposes. And I declare there is a 100-fold increase on all seed we plant because we do it in faith. In the name of Jesus. Amen. So we can collect the offerings.
It is. Yep. Yep. I'll give you some examples. While you guys do the offering, I don't want to forget to mention this one product. So again, I told you guys that you don't need another product, but sometimes there's a product out there that's created that really helps people, and people don't know about it. So one of the things I'm very passionate about is a program called the Registered Disability Savings Plan. Does anybody here know anybody that has a disability, a child or an adult? Please, 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 it is your responsibility once I teach you this to go talk to that person and lead them in the direction to get information on this program. 2008, Jim Flaherty, who was our finance minister, helped push through and create the Registered Disability Savings Plan because he had two disabled sons of his own. And it's a program that's designed for people that have a disability to save money for the future. Right now, if you're on ODSP, you're not allowed to have any more than $5,000 in any savings vehicle, or they claw back your ODSP. So that means these people can't save for their future. They're basically stuck on the system, and eventually, by the time they get to retirement, they're still stuck on the system. And they're never able to sort of save to become independent and take care of themselves. So the way the program works really briefly is if you qualify for the disability tax credit, which is a form you need to get your family doctor to fill out, and there's 100 different types of disabilities that can qualify for this, then you get the disability tax credit, you can open up the RDSP, and they give you a 300% bonus on money that you can contribute. So if you've heard of the RESP for education, they give you a 20% bonus. This one, if you're disabled, they give you a 300% bonus. It's like an investment on nitrous. It's an amazing. So you put in $100, they give you $300 in a matching grant that goes in the investment. We invest it properly. We use Mackenzie Investments, which is the biggest RDSP provider in Canada, and then your money grows. On top of that, if they're a low-income person, so most people on ODSP get about $1,000 a month. If you make under $29,000 per year, they give you a disability savings grant on top of that, which is another $1,000 a year. So if you've got somebody who's 25 years old, and let's say they're, cerebral palsy. They're 25 years old. They were diagnosed when they were 10. You can go back all the way to 2008 when it started. That's 10 years. And you get $10,000 in free money just to open up the account, and you don't need to put a single cent of your own money in. So if they're low income, it's $1,000 a year, retroactive back to the beginning of the program. And then any money you put in on top of that, you get a 300% bonus. So please, if you know anybody with a disability, please ask me or do some of your own research, but it's an amazing program. But if you walk into most banks or institutions today, they haven't even heard of it. Even though legally by law, the Canadian banks are supposed to offer it, I have had multiple clients that are like, Mike, I've already gone to 3 banks, and they told me they have no idea what I'm talking about. So it's an amazing program that people are missing out on. Okay, if we can go to the first slide. The title, Beware of Tim. And Tim is not a person, it's not Tim Hortons. TIM is an acronym. TIM is taxation, inflation, and market fluctuation. I'm going to talk about GICs because unfortunately, 88% of Canadians have money sitting in either GICs or daily interest savings accounts, and they're not beating inflation. Can anybody tell me what inflation is? The government tells us about 3%. I personally think it's closer to 5%. There's something called the CPI index, Canadian Price Index, and they take out what they call volatile effects. So CPI is 3%, but they take out fuel, food, and housing. What do we spend our money on other than our house, our food, and to heat and our house and put fuel in our car? So they take out those three things, which brings it down to 3%, but I think the reality is closer to 5%. So if you are investing your money and you're losing 50% of your money to taxes, doesn't matter what rate of return you get on your investment, you're losing half your money in taxes. Does anybody know somebody in their 70s or 80s that put all their money in RSPs and now they're really mad because they're losing half their money in taxes? Okay, because they came from a generation when the RSP was the only thing, and the government and the banks promoted RSP, RSP, RSP. And especially their generation, they were a savers generation. They didn't have credit cards, so a lot of the people in their 80s had a ton of money in RSPs. And now when you turn 71, you've got to convert it into RIF. You've got to start drawing the money whether you want to or not. It's all taxable income. And then you add on your CPP and your old age security on top of it, you push yourself in a higher tax bracket, and you could literally be in a 43% tax bracket, or 46% is the highest, and lose almost half your money in taxes. Even worse, if you leave that money to the end of your life and you pass away, if you're the last spouse, in the last year of your life, it's called your terminal tax return, you could basically pay 51% in taxes if you have more than $300,000 left in your RSP or in your RIF. And guys, I'm totally for paying taxes. Taxes build our schools and our roads, but don't pay more than you have to. And that money would be better off going towards your grandkids, or you could give it to your church if you want to. Actually, that's one strategy that I use for older clients that are already in their 80s. They've already got all their money in their RIF, and by that point, it's too much money. You can actually put down your church or any charity as the beneficiary, and when you pass away, that creates a tax donation that gives you a direct deduction against the income you would have had to pay. So if you don't like paying, 51% in taxes, then say, too bad, government, you don't get it because this tax deduction basically offsets the money I would have paid in taxes. So I'm not against paying taxes, just don't pay more than you need to. Inflation, most people are not beating inflation with their investments, which we're going to talk about. And market fluctuation is the big one that people are worried about. They're worried that, I'm going to invest my money today and I'm going to wake up tomorrow and find out I lost it all. And unfortunately, a lot of people, when it comes to investments, they want to buy the latest and greatest thing. I don't know how many clients I've had call me in the last 6 months and ask me about investing in marijuana stocks. And by the time that you hear about I'm not kidding you. And then before that, it was Bitcoin. Before that, it was buying gold. And every couple of years, there's a new different fad that people jump into. Well, if you've watched those sectors at all, Bitcoin has dropped over 50%. Most of the marijuana stocks from the beginning of the year have dropped 40 to 50%. And people were jumping in and buying things they had no idea how they worked or how they were priced just because they want to get rich quick. There is a way to get wealthy over time, but you have to have time and discipline. Okay, so next slide. And again, guys, I know I do some bank bashing, but it's just because they don't usually put you in the right product. Okay, so this one, if you can see it, I know it's a little bit dark, but it basically says a GIC at 1%. And all they do is they take your money and lend it back to you at 19%, and they make a guaranteed 18% profit. So if you're a bank, your job is to make money. They're public companies, they've got shareholders. The shareholders demand they make a profit because they want the stock price to go up. And if you walk into a bank and you've never invested before, the first question they ask you is, what is your risk tolerance? And you go, what does that mean? How do you feel about losing money? See, it's the way they ask the question. If they say, how do you feel about losing money? Everybody goes, I don't want to lose money. Great, no problem. We'll stick you in something guaranteed. You can't lose any money, and you'll make a little bit of money. How does that sound? And we all go, okay, because again, we're not taught in school how to invest. So you invest your money at 1%, thinking that you're making a little bit of money, but the reality is inflation's at least 3%, so you're actually guaranteed to lose 2%. Because if you take that money out a year later, that money will now buy you less. Your purchasing power gets eroded because the cost of living keeps going up. And they've just take your money and they say, thank you, Bob, lend it back to your wife, Sally, and Sally can go shoe shopping on her credit card at 19%, and they just made a guaranteed 18% profit by just lending your money back to somebody else. And in the banking system, there's something called a lending ratio. Canada has one of the most conservative lending ratios in the world. It's 9 times. They're actually allowed to lend your money out 9 times over. So for every dollar you put in the bank, they can lend that same dollar out 9 times. When the US went through their financial crisis back in 2008, they were doing 100-to-1 lending. And that's why the Canadian banking system sailed through no problem, and the US banking system almost went bankrupt. So you imagine 18% times 9 is what they're making for every dollar you stick into GIC. And that's why at the bottom there, you'll see TD, BMO, RBC, some of the best investments in the world. Just don't invest in the GIC with TD, buy TD stock through a proper mutual fund. So the banks last year made $33 billion in profit by convincing people that investing is risky, so that you put their money in with them at 1% so they can lend it back to you on a credit card at 19%. Okay. Then the companies at the bottom there, I already mentioned Tim Hortons. The telecommunication, cell phone companies are another industry that I love to hate. So Rogers, Bell, TELUS, we have the highest cell phone rates in the world. I joke with people that when babies are born today, they pop out of the womb with a credit card in one hand and a cell phone in the other hand. Those are 2 industries that are actually protected by law. I don't know if a lot of Canadians know this, but about 4 years ago, the Canadian government passed a law called the bail-in rule, which means if a Canadian bank, because we have 5 major Canadian banks, if a Canadian bank were ever to become insolvent, which means go bankrupt, they can actually go into your bank account and take money out of your bank account to keep the bank in business. So the Canadian banks literally cannot go bankrupt. We have the highest banking fees in the world. And Canadians, 88% of us have money sitting in GICs and daily interest savings accounts that they're lending back to us 9 times over at 18%. They're never going to go bankrupt. You're going to see some ups and downs, but if you look at a Canadian bank stock, my mother-in-law, she worked at TD Bank since she was 18. She retired like 2 years ago. Her average cost, because she got to purchase shares as an employee, her average cost is $5. Because the company is doubled and split again. I think TD Bank is close to $90 a share, and her average cost is $5. That's how much growth, exponential growth she's had on her money. Manulife does health and dental benefits for most large employers. Petro-Canada is owned by Suncor. So Suncor owns 50% of the Canadian oil sands. They own the refinery, they own the pipeline, and they own Petro-Canada. They make money off the whole supply chain. So every time you fill up your gas tank, they make money. Okay, next slide, please. One of the fund companies, by the way, I deal with all the big fund companies in Canada. So AGF, Trimark, Fidelity, Mackenzie, Templeton, NEI. You find a company you want to invest in, likely I can use them. So NEI is pretty unique. They're what's called an ethical investment company. Canadian banks do not offer ethical funds. You can invest in a mutual fund through a bank, but you don't necessarily know what they're invested in. And you could find out they're invested in a company that doesn't line up with your own spiritual beliefs. So NEI has a filter that they go through before they look at companies to invest in. They're not just looking for profit, they're looking for the right type of companies. So they've got a filter that basically they will not invest in alcohol, tobacco, firearms, nuclear, and they look for social responsibility. I can give you a bunch of different company examples, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through that. So if it is something that is important to you, you want to know that you're proud of the companies you're invested in, that they lines up with your ethical beliefs. NEI is a company that offers some great investments. Next one, please. So on some of the slides that I showed you before, use the 9% rate of return. And I always, out of any question, people always go, oh, where do you get 9% from? So I'm going to give you some examples, and I can give you multiple examples, but it all depends on your own personal risk tolerance. If I'm sitting down with Peter, and Peter's got the next 30 years before he retires, then I'm going to look at a growth portfolio, as long as he's comfortable with that. If I'm sitting down with somebody who's 65 and about to retire, I'm going to look for moderate growth to low growth, which you're probably looking at 5 to 6%. But depending on your time horizon and depending on your comfort level, there's different investments you can choose from. And it's my job to follow up with you, adjust your investments over time as the economy changes, but also as you get closer to retirement as well. And because most people are going to be in retirement for 20 to 25 years, I do have some clients that are in their 60s, even 70s, that still have growth portfolios as a portion of their investments. So they've got a conservative part, which is their active income they're drawing from. That's mostly dividends. But then, they've got money that they're not going to need for another 15 years, where they still have a portion of their portfolio that's growth. Okay, so there's a big misunderstanding that people have that, as soon as you turn 65, you got to stick everything into a GIC at 1%. Well, no, if you're 65, you technically have another 20 years to draw your money. You can have some conservative, and then you can have some that's for growth, depending on what your tolerance is. So this is just one fund. This is the AGF Large Cap Dividend Fund, and I just use this to point out, this fund's been around since 1985, so it's been over 30 years. It's averaged 8.4%. This fund is Canadian, does have a little bit of US content, but my point is it's the track record. This fund's been around for over 30 years. If you invested $10,000 in this fund back in 1985, today it would be $134,000. So $10,000 to $134,000. That's a 1,300% rate of return over the last 30 years, and this is considered a medium risk fund. If you go to the next slide, it'll actually show you what it's invested in. So you tell me if you think these companies are going to be around long term. Oh, look, the Canadian banks, Bank of Nova Scotia, Royal Bank, TD Bank. So all the banks are in there. You've got Canadian National Railway. Canadian National Railway has been around for over 100 years. They're the largest railway system in North America. The railroad system is not going to go out of business. We ship more and more stuff on railroad than ever before. You've got Suncor, which again owns Petro-Canada and the oil sands. You've got Enbridge. Anybody heat their house once in a while? Though you hate when you get your bill and every year your bill goes up. Well, again, I don't like Rogers, but I invest in Rogers. I don't like TD, but I invest in TD. I don't like my bill going up every year, but if my bill's going to go up every year, I better invest in the company that's making my bill go up every year because they're probably making more money. BC, which is Bell Canada. Honeywell is an international company. They make everything from the thermostat in your house to turbine engines for jumbo jets, hydroelectric dams. And then the last one at the bottom, they just recently changed their name. It's now called Nutrient. They used to be Potash of Saskatchewan. So that company in Saskatchewan has 40% of all the world's potash, which is fertilizer. If we have a world population that's growing, you need fertilizer for farmers to grow food. So those are just the top 10 holdings, but there's 117 different companies. For the older people in the room, does anybody remember the company Nortel? So Nortel at one point was the largest company on the Toronto Stock Exchange. It went up like 300% in like 2 years, and then it crashed down and went bankrupt. That's my story for telling people, don't invest in individual stocks if you do not know what you're doing. Unless you're a professional, you should not be picking your own stocks, because what I find is people turn on the news and they go, oh, look at everybody just made a ton of money on marijuana stocks, and they want to jump in. And they usually buy 2 or 3 stocks, because when you have a small portfolio, you can't buy that many shares, and they put all their money betting on 2 or 3 companies. Well, if you have one of those companies go bankrupt, you just lost 30 or 40% of all your money for your retirement. If you've got a mutual fund, there's 117 different companies. If TD Bank goes bankrupt, that's one company out of 117. And then this is just one fund out of your overall portfolio. So this is the Canadian Large Cap Fund. I'd probably have a global dividend fund. I'd have a US fund in there as well. And we would make you a portfolio. Most of my clients have 300 to 400 companies in their portfolio. One company going bankrupt doesn't wipe you out, okay? So investing in individual stocks can be very dangerous. Next slide. Real estate. Everybody thinks real estate is a great investment, and I totally agree. But we've had a huge run in real estate that's been fueled by low interest rates. So for the last 30 years, we've had interest rates go straight down and housing prices have gone straight up. Because the cheaper it is to buy a house, the easier it is to carry that cost, the more house value usually goes up. But about a year ago, houses were going for $100,000, $200,000 over asking price. Like, I live out in Durham region, and there was houses that were going for like $600,000 that today are only worth $500,000 if you tried to sell them. So there is some volatility in real estate, and if we have interest rates going up, I think there's going to be even more volatility in real estate. The other problem is real estate is not liquid. So if you bought a house at the peak of the market and all of a sudden real estate starts rolling over and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to get out, guess what? Everybody else wants to get out if the market crashes too, and real estate's not liquid. So if everybody else is trying to get out and you're trying to sell at the same time, you're probably going to have to sell at a loss just to get out of it. With an investment, whether it's your RSP, tax free savings account, RESP, if it looks like the world's going to fall apart, 2 days, 2 business days, I can move you out of that fund into basically cash inside your account. So you can go from the AGF Large Cap Dividend Fund and you can move into cash inside your RSP. You can't lose any money on cash. So one of the reasons why I mentioned that, I love Canada, but Canada is only 3% of the world market, and most Canadians I find have all their money invested in Canada. The US is 51% of the world market, and most Canadians don't have enough exposure to the US. But if you look at the US as an example, 80% of all technology companies are listed on the US stock exchange. So companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Netflix, all these companies that have doubled and tripled in the last 5 years are all US companies. And if you're only in Canada, you missed out on huge growth. So that fund I just showed you, the Canadian Large Cap Dividend Fund, has averaged a 10% rate of return for the last 5 years. I can show you a US fund that's averaged a 20% rate of return for the last 5 years, and it's still considered medium risk. Again, depending on your age, depending on your risk tolerance, I can change your portfolio, but my point is you need to have some exposure outside of Canada. And you need to have exposure that's liquid. So as a big example, my major concern about Canada right now, obviously, is Donald Trump and these tariffs. I read an article about a month ago that said if he puts a 25% tariff on the automotive industry, we would lose over 1 million jobs just in Ontario in manufacturing. It would be an absolute disaster. So if you have all your money in Canada and Trump puts a negative tariff against one of our major industries like the automotive industry, you could find the Canadian market would drop significantly. So that's why you want to have diversification outside of Canada, and you want to have diversification outside of real estate. And I've got a lot of clients that have done well in real estate, and they've gone out and bought 3, 4 rental properties, and they have all their assets in real estate in Toronto. Well, if the Toronto housing market goes down, all their assets go down. And again, it's not liquid. So this here, if you can see it, it says that the Toronto Stock Exchange has averaged 8.2% over the last 30 years. And the Toronto, so this is our market, the Toronto housing market has averaged 6.3. Now, I know you're going to argue with me, oh yeah, but the last 3 years has been higher than 6%. Yes, that's true. But over the last 30 years, real estate has averaged a 6.3% rate of return. And the Toronto stock market has averaged an 8.2% rate of return. So the stock market does better than real estate long term. But the reason why people are so excited about real estate is because we see our real estate prices every day. We live in our house. We see what our neighbor just sold their house for. Everybody sees their real estate, so that's what they're focused on. But the reality is the stock market long term has always done better than real estate. It's more diversified and it's more liquid. Okay, next slide, please. So this is an interesting conversation. 62% of Canadians draw their CPP at age 60. So 60 is the earliest age you can draw CPP. But if you draw it at 60 instead of 65, they penalize you 40%. That is a huge penalty, especially if you live a long time, especially if you're a female, because females live longer than men. I've got my own theory on that, guys. They sort of just like poison you after time just to get rid of you. I'm just kidding. But the reality is, if you are going to live 20 to 25 years in retirement, do you want to take a 40% penalty on a guaranteed income you're going to get for the next 25 years? So the example up here is, if you draw to age 60, you get $631 a month. If you wait to 65, you get $986 a month. That's a $355 difference. That's like $4,000 a year times the next 25 years you're not going to get if you draw it at 60 instead of 65. Now, it's different for everybody, because if I get to 60 and I've got bad health, all the men in my family die of heart attack by the time they're 65, then take your money early. At least you're going to get it now. But if you're healthy and you've got longevity in your family and you've got other assets and you don't need to draw on your CPP, you're better off waiting till you're 65, because now you get an extra $4,000 a year every year for potentially the next 20 years. The other thing to look at too is what are your other sources of income? So if you've got a lot of pension income, let's say you're a police officer, firefighter, school teacher, where you've got a really good pension plan, that's taxable income. you might want to retire when you're 60 and draw some of your pension income from 60 to 65 before your CPP and old age security kicks in at 65 and push you in a higher tax bracket. A lot of my clients, if they're set up properly and they're in a good financial position by 60 or sometimes even 55, retire early, start drawing down your RSPs in those 60 to 65 years, draw down your RSPs when you're in a lower tax bracket before 65 when your CPP and old age security kicks in, and now all of a sudden you're going to lose half your RSPs in taxes. So it all depends. Another thing is you should never draw your CPP while you're still working. I see too many people do this. They're working, they're making 70, 80 grand a year. They turn 60 and all their buddies tell them, oh, hey, we all started drawing our CPP when we're 60. Well, again, if you draw that money, that's income, goes on top of your employee income, and you just end up losing most of your CPP in taxes. Okay, so there is a break-even chart here. All this stuff, if I sit down with you or if you want me to, I can email it to you. But the break-even point, it shows you that if you are 60, a very bottom column, if you live past age 74, you would have been better to wait to 65 because you'd receive more money longer. So again, nobody can estimate what their life expectancy is going to be, but if you passed away before 74, you'd have been better off drawing it earlier and getting more money while you're alive. But if you live past 74, you would have been better waiting and collecting more money longer later. Okay, next slide, please. By the way, we're going to do an answer or a question answer session at the end because I know there's going to be lots of questions about that. Bypass the middleman. Basically, my whole conversation is you need to educate yourself on how to invest your money, whether you do it with me or you do it with somebody else. Don't just blindly give your money to an institution and let them manage it for you without knowing what they're putting your money into, because they're just going to give you usually a low rate of return. They're going to take your money, invest your money for themselves, and keep the profit. We need to put the money in your pocket so you can make that abundance and spread it around. Okay, next one, rule of 72. So teacher in the room. Oh, she moved. Every child in school should learn the rule of 72. So the rule of 72 talks about compounding interest. Albert Einstein said that compounding interest is the most powerful effect in the world, and I'm going to show you why. So what you do is you divide whatever interest rate you're getting on your investment into the number 72, and it'll tell you the approximate number of years for money to double. So let's say I went to the bank, I got some inheritance from a grandparent or something, and I've never invested before. The bank asked me that magical question, Mike, how do you feel about losing money? And I say, I don't want to lose money. Great, no problem, we'll put you in something guaranteed. And they put my $10,000 into a GIC, and let's be generous with the bank, and let's say the bank actually gives me 3%. Well, 3 divided in 72 takes 24 years for my money to double once. And 48 years later, I'm now in my late 70s. I've got $40,000 in my late 70s. Well, how far does $40,000 last you 48 years later? $40,000 48 years from now will buy you a Happy Meal once a month. It won't be enough money to retire on. So at 6%, and 6% is a very conservative balanced fund, at 6%, your money doubles every 12 years. And you would think, well, I'm going from 3% to 6%. I'm doubling my interest rate, so I should double my return. But that's not the way compounding interest works. See, compounding is double on top of double on top of double, so you actually end up with 4 times more money. Instead of $40,000, you end up with $160,000. And then finally, the third column, I know somebody's going to call me out on this. Oh, 12%. Where are you going to get 12% from? The U.S. market in the last 5 years has averaged over a 20% rate of return. It's possible. I'm not going to guarantee it. I tell my clients somewhere between 7 to 9% if you're in a growth portfolio. But there has been years where we've done significantly better than that. But the example here at 12% is $2.5 million. So imagine somebody sat down with you, you were 30 years old, they show you the rule of 72, and they told you about this thing, but you're like, you know what, whatever, and you left your money at the bank. And you wake up one day, you're 7 years old, you walk in the bank and go, you know what, I remember somebody told me years ago this Rule 72 thing, and they said I should have like $2.5 million, but I didn't listen to them, and now I only have 40. Hey, Mr. Banker, I know you took my GIC and you lent it back to somebody at 19%, made a guaranteed 18% rate of return off me, made millions of dollars off me. Can you please now give me back that money so I can retire? They're not going to do it. just as a funny but eye-opening example, I'm a numbers guy, so I sometimes think differently than some people. But I decided I can't legally put this in a slide, but I did a fourth column. So remember, the banks are making 18% off your credit card, right? So somebody give me a wild guess. If I took the same 18% on $10,000 and used this column 48 years later, so we know that 12% turns into $2.5 million, what do you think that 18% turns into? Take a wild guess. $37 million. So if you invest $10,000 with a bank today, they give you 3%, which is better than they're given now, and you keep that money there for 48 years, they made $37 million compounding your money at an 18% rate of return. That's why you want to invest in the banks. They're always going to make money. Okay, next one, please. Slide. Okay, Dave Ramsey, I hope you guys have heard of him. He's awesome, he's amazing. So one of the next thing I talk about is insurance. So everybody gets excited about investments. I get tons of referrals from clients. Oh, go invest your money with Mike. He's good, does the best portfolios, follows up with me, gets me on track for all my investments. I hardly ever get referrals from insurance. And the reason why is nobody likes insurance, right? Because the only time you think about insurance is when somebody usually dies. And actually that's the only time I usually get referrals for insurance is because somebody passes away and either they didn't have any insurance and then all the family members call me, or they did have insurance, they go, oh my gosh, thankfully Mike talked to them and this person actually had proper insurance. So I understand nobody likes talking about insurance, but there's good insurance and there's bad insurance. Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, if you've ever read any of her books, The Wealthy Barber, all say that whole life or cash value insurance is a horrible product. It is designed to make the insurance company wealthy. It's not designed to make you wealthy. I'm not going to bash on the company, but I'll use their slogan, Freedom 55. Freedom 55 came out in the late 80s, and it's like invest in our whole life policy and you'll retire when you're 55. Well, unless you die at 55, you're not becoming wealthy because life insurance is only good when you're dead, right? The whole concept, life insurance is designed to protect you when you're young, when you've got a mortgage, when you've got kids, so that the main income earner passed away, that tax-free money would go to make sure that that family basically completed their financial plan. They were able to pay off their debt, raise their kids, and still retire on time. So all financial planners that are all financial books, not financial planners, because most of them are salespeople, but all financial books, you could go randomly pick any book off the shelf from chapters. Every single financial planning book will tell you buy term and invest the difference. So what that means, if you want to click 2 more slides, 1 and then 2, because we don't have time for the video, we'll say buy term and invest the difference. And what that means is this example here, cash value insurance is designed for you to pay for your whole life. So they're going to take the cost today when you're 30 years old, Peter, and they're going to say, hey, it's $30 a month today, but it's going to be $1,000 when you're 90. And what they do is they take all of those years of what your insurance would be, $30 a month, $80 a month, $150, $500, $1,000 a month, and they're going to take an average cost. And they're going to say, hey, you're going to pay for your insurance your whole life, but we don't want you paying $1,000 when you're 90, so we'll just make you pay an average cost. Okay, give you an analogy. Guys, you're going to own 6 cars in your lifetime. You own a car today that's $30,000, but the car when you're 70 is going to be like $150,000 based on inflation. I'm going to make you pay an average cost for your car today, which includes the cost of the insurance that you're going to buy when you're 7 years old. You might not even be driving when you're 7 years old, right? So that's the way whole life insurance works. They tell you need it for your entire life. So this example here, they're paying $180 a month for $150,000 coverage each. $180 a month is a lot of money. What about $150,000 in coverage? Is that adequate to cover a family? I'm from Durham Region. The average mortgage in Durham Region is $350,000. In Toronto, it's more like $600,000. $150,000 doesn't even scratch the surface of what you would need to pay off your mortgage, pay off your car loans, raise your kids for the next 15 years, take time off work because your spouse just passed away. So most people need significantly more coverage, but if you're paying $180 a month, if you wanted $500,000 coverage with whole life insurance, you're looking at like $500-600 a month. and there's no money left at the end of the month to actually save money so you can retire one day. So the whole idea is we want to give you term insurance for the time period you need it. So Peter, you're in front of me. I keep using an example. So Peter has a baby, or your wife has a baby tomorrow. You're there, but they have a baby tomorrow. That child is probably going to be dependent on you for at least 20 years. And I got clients that have kids that are living at home and they're 28, just so you know. So you need 20 years worth of income replacement, because if you passed away, you would need money to leave to your spouse so that she could raise that child for the next 20 years. So there is a certain time period when you need insurance. But by the time you're 65, if your house is paid off, if your kids are grown up, moved to the house, knock on wood, and you've got no miscellaneous debt and you've got money saved for retirement, why do you need to pay for insurance past 65? It's only meant to cover you for that time period you need it. So the example we have up here is we have $300,000 coverage, and for the same amount of money, it's only $124 a month. That's $55 a month you're saving, and that's a 35-year term. So for 35 years, your price never changes, your cost never goes up, and if you invest the difference, that's $100,000 more in your pocket instead of the insurance company's pocket. So again, there are good products out there, but make sure you know what you have and how it actually works. I've sat down with hundreds of people in the last 13 years where life insurance, they bought it once, they put it away with their will in their safe somewhere, and they never looked at it. And they truly did not understand how it works. So like I just explained, the next slide is the theory of decreased responsibility. When you're young, you've got high liabilities, low assets. Over time, you better grow those assets and you better pay down your debt. But eventually you hit what we call your financial independence number, or FIN number in the corner there. When you're 65, you need to have cash to live. I spend $500 a month on a really expensive insurance policy, and I'm 65 years old, and my wife says, hey honey, I want to retire, I'm 65 now, and I put all my money into a really expensive insurance policy. I better start sleeping with one eye open. You want to know why? Because you only get life insurance when you're dead. If you buy really expensive insurance but don't save any money, she wants to retire, she might just decide, hey, maybe go on a cruise and like nudge him over the edge. So I don't want to give my wife that incentive after 40 years. She might just be sick and tired of me. So I want to make sure I'm wealthy, because then she'll want to keep me around. So the whole idea is there's only two problems with financial planning. Really simple. Either you live too long and you didn't save enough money. That's why we're going to help you achieve that financial independence number. Or you die too soon and you don't have insurance to leave your family so that they are okay financially. So that's why we always believe buy term insurance for that time period you need it, but then make sure you invest enough money that one day you don't need it. Because if you're 70, 75 years old and you pass away, your family doesn't care where the money comes from. They just care that there's money. One of the biggest shames that I see on Facebook all the time is these people pass away and they have to do a GoFundMe to raise money just to pay for the funeral. It's like, why did you guys not have a plan? Why did you not save money for an emergency fund? Why did you not have proper insurance? And again, I'm not saying trying to put those people down, but if they had a plan, they would plan for every occasion. Whether you live until you're 80 or whether you pass away when you're 35. Unfortunately, I've had 5 clients pass away in the last 4 years, and they're all under the age of 57. So you never know when your time comes, but we want to plan for a long life, but we also want to plan if something happens to us, that our family's still okay as well. Okay, next page. So these are a whole bunch of stats, but basically every financial planning book says term insurance is the simplest, best way, cheapest way to buy insurance, and still leaves cash flow available for investing for your future. Okay, next slide. So financial plan, a number of people came up to me and asked me, what do you charge for a financial plan? So I'll say it again, nothing, free, 2 for 1, but just today, it's free. So the way it works, and this is one of the reasons why, and I didn't mention the name of the company before, but I work with Primerica Financial Services. And some people have told me, well, I've had good experiences, I've had bad experiences. All I'll say about that is there's good people that work at banks. There's not so good people who work at banks. There are great teachers that work in our school system. Has anybody ever had a bad teacher before? So it comes down to the individual person. You guys can hopefully tell I'm very passionate what I do. I love this. I do make a very good income doing what I do, but I don't do it for money anymore. I do it because I want to serve and help other people, and by default, God has awarded me with great abundance. So I do a financial plan for free. Doesn't cost you a single cent. And once you get the information, you get your budget, you get an investment plan, you get your insurance plan, I show you how to pay down your mortgage quicker. If you literally want to take this financial plan and go walk in your bank and say, hey, can you do this? You can do that. I don't charge you anything. But if you like what I show you, then and you want to invest with me, those investment companies, insurance companies, or mortgage companies pay me for marketing the program. And I'm totally disclose exactly what I get paid, how I get paid. When you go to the bank and you get your mortgage, do they say, hey, give me $1,000 to do your mortgage? No. But that mortgage broker, when he sets up your mortgage, he gets paid a commission to sell you the mortgage. So that's the way it works with me. I think I mentioned on the investment side, we've got like 13 different companies we deal with, from AGF, Invesco, Fidelity. We deal with different insurance companies. We do health and dental, disability, critical illness for people who are self-employed that don't have coverage through work. And by the next 2 to 3 months, I'll have my full mortgage broker's license. I can help you with all mortgages as well. So basically the way it works is we start with a free financial plan, and then we build your financial house from the ground up. So just like if you were going to build a real house, you wouldn't try and put the roof on before you dig the foundation. Excuse me. So the whole idea is that you need to protect your most important asset. And most people tell me, well, my most important asset is my house. Or if you're a guy, you'll say it's your car. If you're smart, Peter, you'll say it's your wife. But the reality is your most important asset is your cash flow. If you're no longer here because you got injured or you passed away, then you don't have cash flow, the rest of your financial plan falls apart. So the number one thing we focus on to get started is insurance. Because again, knock on wood, we all know our birth date, none of us know our death date. So let's set up, make sure you've got proper insurance. Then we start with your budget. Where are you spending your money? And like I said, most people, once they go through their budget, tell me that it's like $200-300 a month they found in miscellaneous expenses that they really don't need. Right? I get husband and wife to do a separate page, and I put needs and wants. And it's amazing what different spouses think are needs and what the other one think is a want, right? Sometimes I suggest, being like a referee in between while they do that. I am a black belt, by the way, so I can like block some punches. Then we set up your emergency account. The number one reason people have money on a credit card is because they didn't have an emergency fund. Right? If my son has broken his glasses like 3 times in the last 2 years, and it was like $400 every time to fix his glasses, if I didn't have an emergency fund, that would be going on a credit card at 19%. Then we look at debt elimination. We want to make sure that you're paying down your debt. I ethically can't ask you to invest money if you're paying 19% on a credit card, because I can't guarantee you a 19% rate of return on your investment. So we pay down your credit cards, and then we start to build up your investments. I've got clients that I've had to work with 2, 3, 4 years where I got paid nothing to help them pay down their debt. But once they did pay down their debt, they freed up all that cash flow, and now they're investing a ton of money with me. And that is a client for life, because most advisors out there aren't willing to put in free work for 3 to 4 years to get the client on the back end that can invest a lot of money over time. Retirement, and then education savings. Now, just one mention on this. I know, especially for mothers out there, your kids are super important to you. You want them to go to school, especially if you're a teacher. Like if you're a teacher, like school is like number one. But your retirement comes before education savings. And the reason why is you are guaranteed to have to retire one day. Your kids aren't necessarily guaranteed to go to school. And I've seen people that literally put all their money into their kids' education plan, sacrificing their own retirement, and then their kids end up not going to school, or they go to school, but they sort of take like an iffy course, like maybe I'll just try this out because my parents want me to go to school. How many of you have kids that have gone to school that are out of school now, and they're not even working in the industry that they went to school for, right? So I'm totally positive towards education. Just don't sacrifice your own retirement for your kids' education. There's nothing wrong with them having to work a little bit, pay for their own education, or paying off a small student loan, not a huge student loan. And then finally, goals and dreams. So one of the things I also do with my clients, so I don't sound too depressing all the time, is I sit down with them and I find out what their medium-term and long-term goals are. So I go through this acronym called HEALTH, which is, house. Peter, are you living in the house you love, or is this just your starter house? You want to buy a bigger house in 5 years once you got 3 kids running around? Great, let's plan now for that house you're going to buy in 5 years. You know, E is education. Do you want to pay for 100% or do you only want to pay for 50%? A is automobile. Do you have a car that is like on its last leg? Do you need another car in the near future? I told you I was car shopping. My car is paid off. It's been paid off for 2 years. Well, I was paying $400 a month for my car payment. When I paid off that car, I just took the $400 that I was already paying and I put it into my car savings account. I don't work for Simply Financial, which used to be PC Financial, but I strongly suggest that you guys go open up an account with Simply Financial because it's free. Free banking fees, free checks. I was with PC Financial for like 18 years since they originally started. And with Simply Financial, you can have 7 different bank accounts, all no fee. So I max them out. I got 7 accounts. And what happens is all my money goes into my main checking account, but then I have automatic payments set up to go to all the different accounts. So I have $200 a month that goes in my emergency fund. I got $200 a month that goes to my vacation fund. I've got $100 a month that goes to my Christmas fund. Like I've had clients that literally call me in November asking to take money out of their RSPs so they can buy Christmas presents. I'm like, you know that Christmas comes like every 12 months, right? And you know that if you take money out of your RSPs, you're getting killed on taxes and you're stealing money from your retirement. So I tell my clients, put $100 a month away into your Christmas fund, and every December you have $1,200 for Christmas. So, and then I've got a Honey, I Sorry I Did It account. So Peter, you're going to get in trouble when you're in the doghouse. You got to take your wife out for a nice dinner, buy her flowers, all that kind of stuff. So I've got a Honey, I'm Sorry I Did It account. There's never enough money in that account, by the way. But I literally have 7 different accounts, including my car account, where automatically everything comes out. Listen, I'm human. If there's too much money in my checking account and I go shopping, ooh, I got $4,000 in my checking account. What can I buy with that? My checking account typically only has, on average, about $500 in it because I automatically take the money out and put it in the other account so I don't see it. That's the way I do it. That's the way I stay disciplined so that I don't see big money sitting in my checking account and go, ooh, what can I buy with that? Okay. Where was I? So automobile, L, legacy. You know, do you want to give money today, more money to your church, more money to a charity or foundation? I give to Sick Kids Hospital because my son was there when he was born, and it's an amazing institution, so I want to be able to give money to them. But plan for it. Fit it into your budget. T is travel. Ladies, where would you like to go? What would you like to see? Right? I want you to enjoy your life, but enjoy your life within reason. I've literally gone on vacations with other couples where we went to, it was actually a wedding destination, and we went to Cancun for a wedding, and the last day of the wedding, everybody was sitting around the pool with these like depressed looks on their face. And I'm like, why are you guys all so depressed? We just had an amazing week-long, our friends just got married, and they're like, yeah, we're trying to figure out how we pay off this credit card debt from our vacation. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, well, our friend got married. We didn't have the money. We had to show up because we were in the wedding party. And we put $4,000 in our credit card at 19%, and we have no idea how we're going to pay it off. Right? I want you to travel. I want you to go see different cultures, but plan it, budget for it, so that when you go on vacation, you're not stressing about how to pay for it when you get back. And then last one is H is hobbies. What hobbies do you do now? What would you like to do more of? Would you like to volunteer more, garden more, horseback ride? I think we all need to live an abundant life, but it all comes down to planning. And I'm done. So I actually ended early. That's amazing. Actually, just because I have 5 minutes, I'm going to give this to you, Peter. So I'm not picking on you, but I'm using it as an example of a young couple that's about to get married. So there is a brochure here called Marriage and Money. And I love the quote here on the back. It says, everybody looks forward to their honeymoon, but what about the money moon? When the wedding's over and life together begins, including your financial life, create a few simple programs in the beginning of your relationship that can lead to nuptial and financial bliss. And then what it does, it gives a checklist here. Create a household budget and stick to it. Pay down debt accrued before you get married. Start saving for your future together. Plan for the unexpected. And as a couple, create a total financial strategy. And then it gives you do's and don'ts of managing your money. And it gives you a pie chart of where you should spend your money. So just like the wealthy barber says, you should save 10% of your money, learn to live off the other 90%. It says that your debt should be no more than 30%. And that's all debt. Mortgage, credit card, line of credit should be no more than 30%. You should have 35% for household expenses, including food and clothing and heat and hydro. So it just gives you some examples of where your budget should go. But when I talk to most people have no clue where the money goes. They just know there's none left at the end of the month. And more clients I'm talking to in the last probably 2 years is they're drowning. And I don't know if that's anybody in here, but literally they're getting to the end of the month and there's no money left and they're buying their groceries on credit cards. And I know people say, oh yeah, I just use my credit card because I get the points. I don't care what the points are. The points aren't worth using your credit card to buy groceries. Those are basic expenses. Those should come from your normal cash flow. That shouldn't be going on a credit card. So guys, hopefully I've given you, financial planning is a huge, and that's why I have to sit down with people and do a customized financial plan depending on where you are in your life. But there's so much information out there, but it's having a coach that's going to sit down with you, show you how to apply it, and then once a year, gently kick you in the butt to make sure you stay on track and you keep with the rules of managing money. Okay?
Amen, amen, amen. Good stuff. So unfortunately, I don't have another draw prize for you guys. But you got yours already. So okay. So first off, I would just like to thank all of you again for coming out. I really hope you've been blessed. We've all done our best here to show you love and to show you what we believe God's will really is, right? Not just spiritual side, but a lot of practical things you can go home and start doing right now. Okay. I would also like to thank my volunteers. Jesus knows who you are, so there's a lot. So I don't want to go through all the names. There's a lot. You know who you are. Jesus knows who you are. I know who you are. Thank you all for helping. Thank you. And of course, thank another one for our speakers as well. Awesome job, guys. I do have to make a couple quick pitches. So next week, Saturday, is Charis Day. So for anybody who's interested at all in the school, I highly encourage you come check it out. We're going to be streaming directly from Colorado itself. As well as Andrew coming in November. If nobody saw the flyer, Andrew is coming up in November. The big man himself is going to be here. So that's going to be really, really exciting. Also, there is now a survey available for you guys to take. There is a physical copy out on the registration table, as well as an online version you can take. And everybody who enters that survey, we will also be drawing at the end of the month for a winner from that, who will also win something. So you see, we like to give. And on that note, there's a bunch of free CDs at the back, so anyone who didn't get...
Can I mention the budgeting seminar?
Yes.
Okay. One of my big passions is budgeting, obviously, because if you don't budget properly, you don't have money for all the other things that you need. So my office is in Whitby. I know it's a little bit of a drive for some of you, but I'm doing a budgeting seminar. It's free at my office Wednesday the 15th, which is this Wednesday coming up at 7 p.m. And I'm going to be doing one seminar every month for the next 12 months. So we're starting with budgeting because that's the most important thing. Then next month we're going to do one on mortgages. I mentioned this new stress test. I think a lot of people are going to be sideswiped by mortgage rules and interest rates going up. So we're going to do one on mortgages, and then we'll roll into RESPs, RDSPs, pension plans, and how pension plans work and how to transfer them if they make sense. One example I use is Sears Canada, which just went bankrupt, and a lot of those people, if they didn't take their pension plan with them, they're now getting their pension plan cut by 40%. So if you leave your employer, it's usually in your advantage to take your pension plan with you, so it's not attached to the employer. So anyways, anybody that gave me your email address, I'll put you on an email list to let you know every seminar for the next 12 months, and you can show up to any ones you want to.
And you got flyers for that
Yep.
at the back there.
Yep.
He knows a lot of stuff, eh? So as I was saying, there's some free CDs at the back for anyone who didn't get one. Please get one. It's called Prosperity's First Step, I believe. So again, that's what our theme has been, which is very important. And one more thing I wanted to show you guys, because I personally really love these. They're called scripture cards. We've got a bunch of different ones. Right now we've got all the prosperity-related scripture cards, and they're not like cards for like crazy eights or whatever. They're cards with scriptures on them that are very convenient. I mean, there's 50, I believe, in here. This was sitting in my pocket, no problem. And anytime I want, I can pull out some of the Word of God and look at it and read it and see what He has to say about this topic. It's only $5 for a pack. We literally don't, that's our cost to make them. We don't make any money off them. So I highly encourage you, get them, check them out. And even if you don't like, these are King James, you don't like King James, fine. Find the scriptures in the translation you like and implant it in your heart, okay? So, other than that, again, thank you all for coming. Mike is going to hang around as well as our other two speakers because we would like to have some engagement with you guys. And if you have any questions or anything like that, they would love to answer them. Other than that, bless you, bless your families, bless your household. In Jesus' name, amen.
Definitely has the question too. If you want a personal question that's private, I can talk to you after as well. I'm going to start with him and then it's this gentleman. Yeah. Go ahead.
My best friend My best friend was a financial planner before he retired, and
Yep.
he was one of these guys who didn't believe in God, so he didn't believe in the 10%. So what do you do? Like, how do you do the 10%? The some people say 10, 10, 80. And that is that on your net? Is it on your gross? How does that work?
Yeah, you know, and that's a question that I think is personal, and you can ask your pastor about that as well. The net and gross, I think, you know, you got to ask. You know, I think you need to pray to God about that because it's a big difference, especially if you're in a high tax bracket. And what I would say, and this is just me personally, when I became a Christian, I couldn't do 10% right away. I already had bills. I couldn't do 10% right away. So I started with 2%. And then I worked up to 3%. And I eventually got to 10%. I think it took me about 3 years. And I prayed on that. I asked God about that. And I think for me, that was the right decision. Because if I went with 10% right away, I'd be cutting back on food for my kids. Right? It's a big chunk. But the other thing, too, is I think with this world of abundance is we can find ways to make more money. Now, I have my own business, so I have the ability to work more hours than a standard 40-hour week, and I typically always do. But there are people out there today that need to find a way to make more money. If you're in a job that's only making, especially if you're living in Toronto, if you're only making $40,000 or $50,000 a year, and I know it's not all about money, but if you're only making $40,000 a year living in Toronto, there's nothing left over for retirement, for giving to your church or anything. Is there a way that you could find an extra part-time job? Is there a way you could start your own business? Is there a way that you could look at your industry and maybe upgrade your knowledge or education to find a better paying job? I think sometimes people are a little bit too complacent in their job where you can, especially if you have the abundant mindset and you're attractive to employers, you can find a better job that will pay more if you're looking for it. Yeah.
I have a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
My daughter. And I've been teaching her over the last year or two. I go, do you know anything about finances? She goes, no. I go, what did they teach you at school when you said that? I go, they don't teach you anything about taxes? Okay, you know what? I'm going to teach you what I know.
Yep.
And I've got her over the last year to put some money aside every month in RSP a little bit. Well, I just started. She just started working. And I go, now I'd like you also, if you would, if you trust me, put a little bit more in an investment.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to show you for yourself. How do I get her to believe me? Because now she's beginning to get the big picture, how important it really is. Because my dad never told me that until a lot later. I'm telling you now, you're 20 years old. And by the time, if you invest monthly, I just put RSP just as an example. But if you put it in an investment, and we got to find the right one for you, and you think about it, it's not there. It doesn't exist no more.
Yep.
Watch what happens.
Yep.
But how do you convince someone who's 20 years old who thinks, I know everything?
So guys, I hope that you're all listening to this, and I'm not saying it's all 20-year-olds, but how do I say it? There's no 20-year-olds in the room, so I can say this. Okay, they are, the human brain does not fully develop until you're about 25. So technically a 20-year-old is still not fully, however you want to say that. You almost need to tell them what to do gently, and then if they don't listen to you, then hopefully they can listen to me. But what I would do is I would show them one of those slides that showed the cost of waiting. If you start when you're 20 instead of 25, you're thinking, it's only 5 years. It's the 5 years at the beginning where you get the most compounding growth. Like for her, $100 a month at 20, if she leaves it in there and doesn't touch it, at a 9% rate of return, it's $1 million. It's $1 million by the time she's 60 years old. Now, what I do know about young people is young people like money because they like the new iPhone, they like all the gadgets and stuff, so they like money. So you've got to relate the short-term pain of budgeting and investing a day to the long-term gain that, hey, you're gonna have $1 million. And now you can also use your own story, if this is your story. Hey, I didn't start until I was 35 because my dad didn't teach me, and because I started when I was 35, it's gonna take me $500 a month to equal the same that it would take you only to save $100 a month if you start when you're 20. And then educate them. And I cringed a little bit when you said RSP, and the reason why I cringed, RSPs are great for certain people in a high tax bracket, but you should not put somebody under the age of 25 in an RSP. It should be in a tax-free savings account, and this is my biggest beef with the banks, a number of beefs, but the tax-free savings account was misnamed. It should have been called the tax-free investment account, because right now 80% of people I sit down with, and this is like 10 years later, 80% of people I sit down with have their tax-free savings account sitting in a daily interest savings account getting 0.5%, because that's what they think it is. Your tax-free savings account is just the account type, or what I call a bucket. You can take any investment type and put it inside the tax-free savings account. So that AGF large cap dividend fund I just showed you, that's averaged 10% for the last 5 years, and medium risk banks and cell phone companies, you can have that fund inside your tax-free savings account, and in the last 5 years, you would have doubled your money in the last 5 years, tax-free inside your tax-free savings account. But people don't know that they can put their investments inside their tax-free savings account. There is 2 young guys sitting, Desmond, your boys at the back. I was like, oh my gosh, as soon as your kids turn 18, get them to open up a tax-free savings account. The minimum to open up an account is $25 a month, which is less than a coffee a day, and get them saving that. And then you go back to your kids, Desmond, and 6 months later, you say, hey, listen, you didn't know that $25, let's increase it to 50. 6 months later, you didn't know it's the 50, let's do 100, right? Like, how many kids in their 20s are still living at home? You're paying for their food, their clothing, like their cell phone in some cases. Give me a break. They're living at home, they got a part-time job, they can do $25, $50 a month. And then every 6 months, get them to increase it. And you would be amazed at quickly that money accumulates. And then you show them the long term, and they're just blown away.
Can that be switched now from the RSP? Because you just started it, right?
So if she's in a low tax bracket, you could take the money out of the RSP, pay like 10% in taxes, and then put it in the TFSA instead. Yeah, and if you've got a TFSA at the bank, you can transfer it from a TFSA at the bank to any of the investment companies that I deal with. But the tax-free savings account, as of 2018, everybody here, you have $57,500 worth of room, because every year you get $5,500 in room, and every year that keeps accumulating. So if you're married, between you and your spouse, you have $115,000 that you could put in that all grows tax-free, and you could average anywhere between 6 to 9% rate of return. I got a lot of clients now that are selling their houses in Toronto and downsizing because they realize their house is their biggest asset. They want to retire. They don't have enough money in other assets. They can sell that house, and let's say they got a $300,000 or $400,000 profit. They could put at least $115,000 in their TFSA. All that money grows completely tax-free and comes out tax-free later. And tax-free, especially in Canada, is really necessary, because if you've got all your money in RSPs, and even if you got a company pension plan through work, let's say you're in your 70s and your roof has a leak and you need 10 grand. Your car breaks down, you need 10 grand. You have a heart attack, you need money for medication. If you have to take $10,000 out of your RSPs, you basically get killed like 40% in taxes, and it pushes you in a higher tax bracket, and you can now get your old age security clause back. So if you've got $100,000, $200,000 in your TFSA by the time you retire, and something happens to you, that money's completely tax-free. There's another strategy I show people if they've got too much money in RSPs and they're well off sort of financially. If you're hitting 55, 60 years old and your mortgage is paid off, you realize, wow, I got all this RSP money. You can actually convert your RSP to a RIF early, and you can start drawing out your RSPs, pay a little bit of taxes before you hit 65 and you go to a higher tax bracket because of CPP and old age security, but start drawing down your RSPs even if you don't need the money, and then take that money and put it back in your tax-free savings account. So you start drawing down your taxable income while you're in a low tax bracket, and then put it back into a tax-free vehicle so that later in your life you've got tax-free money. Because the RIF schedule forces you to draw more and more money every year, and by the time you're in your mid-80s, you've got to take 15% of your money out of your RIF whether you want to or not. So if you live into your 90s, you're literally guaranteed to run out of RSP money because the government forces you to draw more and more money every year and push you in a higher tax bracket. So RSPs work good for your working years if you're in a high tax bracket, but then you want to deaccumulate your RSPs before you hit 71, where you're forced to draw the money at a higher and higher rate and pay a lot more in taxes. And again, I know that sounds really complicated. I can break it down and make it easier based on everybody's situation. But the tax-free savings account, I believe everybody needs to have one. Even if you are in a high tax bracket and using RSPs, you still need to have some tax-free money. Yes?
I just had a question because you mentioned tax-free, but what kind of tax-free? So not just a regular tax-free savings account, like you're talking about
Right, so
like
any bank or any financial advisor can open up a tax-free savings account, but what I mentioned, people think the tax-free savings account is the actual product. It's like when I ask people, well, what's in your RSP? And they're like, well, it's an RSP. No, what's inside your RSP? The tax-free savings account is just the account type. So it's like a bucket. The government says this is a tax-free savings account, and whatever you put in that bucket, it grows tax-free and comes out tax-free. So you can open up a tax-free savings account with me or Edward Jones or Investors Group or whoever, but I can pick an investment for you. So let's say you're a young woman, you want to save for a down payment for a house. Well, if you're going to buy a house in the next 3 years, I'd pick a medium risk dividend fund where you're going to get a 5% dividend, whether the market goes up or down, but it's going to be 5%. And it's going to be pretty conservative because you're going to take the money out in 3 years for your down payment. But if you say, no, I've already got a house, this is my money for my retirement, it's 30 years from now, then I'll use something like I gave the example where it's a growth fund where you're going to get 7, 8, 9%. So, but you can open up a TFSA with any financial advisor, it's not just a bank. Yes, sir. Depends. So that's a more complicated question, but if it's a Canadian mutual fund, you won't be taxed on it. Yeah. If you're buying stocks, like US stocks, inside a trading account with a TFSA, then there's different rules on that. Again, I don't usually suggest people buy individual stocks because unless you got 40 hours a week to watch the stock market go up and down, read prospectuses, go to annual meetings of the companies, most people don't have the time to invest in individual stocks. Yes, young lady.
I just have this question about the TFSA, but invested in mutual funds.
Yep.
But if the mutual funds are not growing, what would you say about that?
Was-
The mutual funds
Yes.
are